Today I'm at like 3x,
3x.
my entry salary.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Today I'm here with my good friend Mia. She is a biomedical engineer and she's agreed to this amazing interview that we're going to have here. I have a lot of questions for her, a lot of hard questions. Namely, why did she choose biomedical versus electrical engineering?
Sure.
We'll get into that shortly. But Mia, tell me a little bit about yourself. Why did you choose to go into engineering at all?
Yeah, and feel free to dial me in if I go on a tangent.
No, it's all
I can
good.
do that sometimes. I think from, a young age when you're like kind of classic story of like tinkering around and playing with different things, I had a lot of science teachers from a young age kind of notice like, oh, she seems like she might be good on a STEM track or that kind of inkling. And then when it comes to time to graduate high school and you're 17 and you're graduating and you're trying to decide what you're going to do with, the rest of your life, big stuff. I thought, engineering seems good. I might love to go into medical school someday. So biomed might be like a really nice transition into that if that's the path I end up going down.
Okay, and were you like typically good at math and all of that, or? Yeah,
I would say pretty stereotypical like math and science kid. English was by far my worst. I transferred to a new school like 6th through 12th grade, and we moved to a new town, and ironically my cousin was my English teacher in 6th grade, and I was really bad. And she had to like call up my mom and say like, oh, we're not super sure what's going on. Meanwhile, my math teacher calls up my mom in the same like week and says we're going to skip her for 2 grades. So it's like a little bit of a juxtaposition of, yeah.
So how old are you when you finished high school?
Still 17, but like I just got to be in a fortunate opportunity to kind of work ahead into my math and science classes.
Okay. So in high school at this point, let's say it's 10th, 11th grade, is that when you knew that you were definitely going to do engineering? Yeah,
I would say by like 9th grade, we were doing this project called the Rube Goldberg project, which very classic and near and dear to a lot of young engineers.
Can you explain to somebody who doesn't know what that is?
Yeah. So it's one of those like energy transfer little projects and studies where it's like kinetic into potential energy, and you usually have like some goofy end goal. Like ours was to open our science textbook to like page 372 or something. By the end, and start it with like dropping a marble, and you had to get 20 steps in there, and that was like pretty open-ended however you did it. And I just kind of remember like working with a group of other 14-year-olds and the rest of them kind of being like, this is really lame, and I'm like, no, this is super cool thing ever. So that was kind of when I knew
you'll be an engineer one day.
Yeah.
Okay, but you knew, did teachers tell you, or your parents also tell you, kind of move you in a certain direction?
Yeah, my parents are super blue collar, and family in general, like not a lot of, five other siblings, nobody else went to school, not a lot of like push into undergrad kind of degree pathway in general. I remember going to my mom and saying like, I think I want to be an engineer, and she was like, what is that? But I had a science teacher my freshman year of high school, and she kind of pulled me aside. She had me like tutoring some of the other kids in some different like physics and chemistry concepts, and was like, I'm going to introduce you to an alumni who is an engineer who went to a local college and studied, I think he happened to study chemical engineering, but he kind of talked to me, and I got kind of a taste of it, and then I did other extracurricular stuff. Like this same teacher had me act as like a camp counselor for a summer camp for like kids science camp. It was called Camp Invention, and the kids would like come in and take stuff apart and then like put it back together. And it was my way of like getting more exposure to it and
giving back to it.
Yeah, because I didn't have that when I was their age.
Okay, so without somebody identifying this for you and the mentor that you spoke to, do you still think you would have done it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think now in 2024, there's a lot more programs out there that kind of get young kids into like the STEM world, and especially young girls, and like pushing that agenda, not aggressively, obviously, but like just showcasing it as an option in general. And that kind of stuff didn't exist when I was a kid. I'm not sure. Just given the fact that, like I said, my family was pretty blue collar, and like I didn't know a lot about what that meant or what that was. I just knew that I liked math and science and liked kind of fidgeting around with things, and that was about it. So it was a big blessing to have some of those teachers early on. For
Awesome.
sure. Yeah.
Okay. No, very good. I think that it is important to have somebody who can show you the way.
Right.
And a lot of people might not know that there are opportunities available to them if they've never seen that happen before.
Sure.
But no, good for you. I'm glad for those mentors that were in your life. Yeah. Okay, so now walk me through your college experience. You enter school and you know right away that you're doing biomedical, or you're just kind of, I'm doing engineering and I'm going to figure it out later.
Yeah, I was pretty like, I don't want to say aggressive because that sounds like a harsh word, but I was pretty gung-ho on like picking biomed.
Yes.
Again, for like the med school kind of track and ties and that train of thought. I think.
So, real quick, why didn't you go to med school?
I ended up liking engineering more than I thought I would.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a good answer. But I think I went in thinking like a little bit niche. If I could go back and do it all again, and it kind of goes into what you were saying at the very beginning of our talk of like electrical versus biomed, I went in with these blinders of like, I want to go into the med device field and I want to go maybe to med school. And so I think this will do it. Biomed is an industry and like a specific major of studies, really new for a lot of universities. It was not that established at mine, and like still quite a few engineering programs don't have it at all. It's usually a blend of like mechanical and electrical and a little bit of chemical. Ours is pretty heavy on the electrical side, funny enough. So if I could go back and do it, I probably would have picked like something more broad. And when we talk about like my work history so far, you'll kind of see that I tried to widen the net too. But yeah, I don't regret it because one, the biomed major at my particular university was kind of the fun group. Like we were known as we were known as being kind of the more social group out of like all the other chemies and electricals and mechanicals. And it was also like whether this is important or not, it's just a fact. Like it was the closest 50-50 split to female and male out of all the disciplines. And obviously I have like some of my best friends from the major, so I don't think I'd regret it, but it's an interesting concept to be like, this was 10 years ago, would I do the same thing? I don't know.
Right, that's kind of the question. So what would you tell now your 18-year-old self?
Yeah, I think I would say like you picked the right school. Obviously too, you make the most out of whatever you pick.
Yeah.
I remember like stressing so much about like school A versus school B and being like, oh, I don't know. But I'm truly under the impression of like, no matter where you go, you kind of adapt and like figure it out. And there's always the option to transfer. Like it's not as big of a deal as people make it out to be.
Do you think that it's important for most people to go to a very prestigious school? Not even Ivy League, but just, whatever field that you're in, typically there are some schools that are viewed upon as being more prestigious or better. Is that crucial, or unless you're really doing Ivy League, none of that matters? Where do you think you stand on that?
Yeah, my like personal strengths have always been like gumption and grit and hard work. I tell people all the time in interview settings and like at the job, I'm not the smartest person in the room. Like in a room of engineering, I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. Like I have no interest in that because
you're in the wrong room.
You're not gonna learn like that.
Right.
But I will outwork anybody in the room, and that's true. So to me, like wherever you went to school doesn't necessarily matter. Now, as I've like kind of progressed into my career, that's for the most part held true. There have been certain particular companies that like sometimes will push an agenda of like where they tend to recruit from. But still, like, I don't know, within those, sometimes your resume and your track record can speak for itself. And I think that, like, as you tell your story, that's all that matters.
Right. No, great answer. Because I thought that when I was younger as well. My parents pushed me in engineering, as you know my story. I come from two engineering parents, and I was kind of, if I wasn't an engineer, then I'm a total failure.
Right, very classic.
Very classic Eastern European story, as you know. So no, they were kind of thinking, well, there are these better schools and all that. End of the day, though, I went to a state school. It worked out. It's all good.
Exactly. A lot less student loans and headache.
Yeah, exactly. That's the truth. So there are pros and cons to this, and I think it really depends on what your ultimate career goals are and what companies you want to work for. But I'm glad that you had a similar experience like I did.
For sure, yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned being a gritty and having a lot of gumption. So what habits would you say, maybe they're seemingly small, but what habits do you think that you have that have led to your success, and we'll get to that real soon.
When you trickle it all the way back to when I was this engineering student,
yes,
it was like being the last one in the lab and being like the last one in the library, repeating the practice problem for the 100th time instead of the 99th time like the rest of my peers. It was really like the time and the energy and the effort and like putting it in. I understand, and I'm not naive to the fact that like that doesn't work for everyone. But for me, that like was tried and true always in every situation, and even now I'm in the workforce too. It works kind of the same.
Well, see, I disagree. I think that works for everyone. That's a universal rule,
fair.
in my opinion. Because if you're doing that extra problem, or it's very obvious when you're working out too, that last rep is the most crucial one. That's where you start to grow.
Right.
Really. So I think just repetition is really, really important. So yeah, don't sell that short. I think
fair.
That's a big thing. And yeah, if you're the last one to leave, the first one in all the time, you're going to stand out no matter where you are.
But it's a balance too, though, especially as you like in school, that's one thing. But when you move into the workforce, there's a lot of other stuff that should and does take priority over the time that you invest in work. So it's trying to figure that out. And that's been, we can probably get into it in a few minutes, but that's been one of the struggles that I've had, like as that type of student, trying to be that type of worker, but also prioritize other things in my life.
So I think that the timing of this is important because when you're in school, that's the time to really hit it really, really hard because that is your full-time job.
Right.
Okay. Then when you enter the workforce, yes, you want to stand out, and it depends how aggressive you want to push your career and all that. And that's important too. We'll discuss job versus career. You're choosing a career, not a job. So how hard you want to push it really depends on how capable you are, how much time you have, and all those things. But there are times for that. So now, as you see how I live with my family and everything, it's hard for me to do that.
Sure.
So there are times to do that, and then also times to scale back. And we'll get into burnout shortly, for sure. Okay, so you're doing biomedical. Electrical was there for you. You did not go that route. Was it just because you were already so curious about biomed going in, or was it also your friends and the job opportunities or something like that? Did you think, for instance, that if you went to biomed, you would have more opportunity than if you went, let's say, electrical or chemical?
Yeah, I would say it was the industry was one piece of it, and like embarrassingly so to admit, I was a little nervous about conceptually understanding a lot of the things in electrical.
Sure.
Like I got a lot of preliminary experience that in some high school physics courses and that kind of thing, and I remember always being a little like, what's going on? I don't really get it.
That's always my joke with my mechanical friends.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It's like, oh, well. All right, I'm not going to go there.
But then I like, it's funny, my university, like I kind of said a few minutes ago, but a big piece of the biomed degree was electrical focused courses. Those are my favorite courses. And part of it's like having the right teacher, professor, whoever.
Yes.
And I had a fantastic professor who explained it in a way that it had never been explained to me like that.
Okay.
And it clicked and I got it. And there was a point in there where I was kind of already too far into the biomed journey where I kind of thought to myself, I really like this electrical stuff. And I'm kind of good at it. I wonder if in another life, like, maybe I could have been in an EE.
Yeah, maybe.
But it's good. It's all good.
Do you know that I actually did biomedical for a semester?
Oh, I didn't know. Wait, I actually didn't know that.
No,
that's crazy. Yeah.
No, there was a semester there. I kind of like this combination that you mentioned as well.
Yeah.
And this is before now mechatronics is everywhere. Yep. So this is early 2000s, and it's like, I kind of like the biomed stuff, but I got into some of the chemistry, and organic chemistry was required. Yeah. And I said, nope, not for me.
Yeah.
That was it.
That'll do it. Yeah.
That'll do it for me. And I just stuck with electrical and I was good there. But I did have good mentors that pushed me along the way too. All right. So you're in biomed, you're about to graduate. So now when did you start considering applying for internships? And that's also how you and I met, by the way. That's a fun story. Yeah. Long story short, I met Mia because she ended up submitting an application, submitting a stay at our Airbnb. And we were hosting her there for a month or two while she was doing an internship. So, yeah.
That was funny. That's a wild story.
That's a wild story. It's amazing. But when did you decide, hey, I need to start looking for an internship? I want to start padding my resume. How early on did you start thinking about that?
By the way, that was almost 7 years ago that happened. So, yeah. Yeah, we're both getting a little older.
I was 27.
I was brand new to being 21. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway,
that's crazy. You're not wrong, yeah. You were a junior, so what were you then?
Yeah, I think I was a rising third or fourth year. I did a 5-year program.
Okay, so yeah, when did you begin to start really considering, okay, I need to get out there?
So part of my specific university's kind of appeal to me was it was a mandatory internship program.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, so you have to do...
You have to do it.
You have to do... Technically, it's advertised as 5. You can get away with 3 internships to graduate. That was something that was important to me to... Okay. Again, somebody who didn't have a lot of plugs or connections in the industry to understand. Conceptually, it seems like it's a good fit, right? But get some experience and decide, like, is this actually something that I like? And get paid while you're doing it, which is even better.
Right.
So that's part of the reason I even picked that university, and they have a lot of connections with a lot of companies in the area, but also kind of globally and within the US.
Do they have statistics where they say something like, 95% placement of all of our students after we graduate?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. I don't know what it is off the top of my head.
But I'm sure that's...
But they're very into that. And it's good. They invented the co-op program. It's University of Cincinnati. I can plug them.
You can. Yeah,
they invented the co-op program.
Go Bearcats.
Yeah, you got it.
We played against them.
There you go. So they invented the program. And it's pretty near.
Okay, so can you explain to me what the difference between a co-op is versus an internship?
I can try. I can explain it the best I know it. So the way I've always kind of distinguished the two is an internship is one, a little bit more of a choice and less requirement, and typically during a summer semester session when you're off of school anyway. A co-op is kind of replacing a semester of school in a way. I still did my full credits that any other biomed engineer in the country would do. But it started as early as the fall of my sophomore year. Okay. So I was 18 or 19 when I first started working as an engineer, or like an engineer, right?
Right.
At my first internship experience. And then you basically do like an alternation pattern of on a semester and then back to school for a semester, then back to work, and then so on and so forth. Yeah. There's no rules of like, you have to do all 5 of them at the same place. You could do 1 of them at one place, and so on and so forth. I ended up doing 3 at the same place, very close to my hometown. Okay. Kind of had the like, oh, wow, I really like this, but there's probably more to the world than my tri-state area. So that's when I ended up getting the one down in Dunedin.
Yeah, in Florida, And
applying, and applying. And then reaching out to you guys. It was funny, I was struggling really hard to find a place to live that was affordable for a college kid.
Well.
And then my best friend at the time was like, oh, let's try Airbnb. And she found you guys, sent it to me, and then I messaged.
Amazing. By the way, guys, long story short, we became great friends with Mia after that. She actually came to our wedding and everything.
Oh, yeah. That's just like, now I feel like we go way back. It's such a funny,
we go way back. That's so funny.
It's such a funny way. I remember, too, thinking like, this is going to be really weird, or like really cool. Because I was like in there. I was living right with you guys.
Yes, it was fun.
I had every intention of kind of like doing it for a few weeks and then dipping out if I needed to. But it was good. It worked out really well.
No, that's life. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you start with your co-op and internship programs early. And then, I'm looking at your resume. You went through a lot of different companies. Besides obviously just earning some money, what would you say was the greatest value to you to do a couple different ones?
Yeah, I think one, you get a sense from a young age of like what different corporations have to offer and like what corporate America is in general. Like there's nothing like going from, your high school job of like flipping burgers, or I made bagels at a bagel shop, right? Yeah. So then your first experience in industry, and you're kind of like, whoa, this is different, like cubicles and people asking me for things. So I think that in and of itself is super valuable. But I think too, engineering is, as much as we maybe sometimes don't think so, it's very broad, even within biomed, which is kind of niche as far as what you can end up doing. When I first picked it, I was like, oh, I'm going to maybe do design engineering and design like orthopedics and prosthetics and go down that road. And that's not at all what I ended up doing or being interested in. Right. I got a lot of my experience early on in manufacturing and spending time on the floor with operators. And I like very quickly fell in love with that. I think part of it is just, again, like the blue collar family and the fit with that and like the comfort within that. But Yeah, I think it's just really important to, like, in helping to decide if it's a fit for you or not. It's a lot easier just to decide your second or third year of college if it's something that you want to do, rather than, like, getting all the way to the end of a 5-year program and being like, well, maybe I should have done marketing or whatever else.
But I think also the concern that I have is that if you get to the end and you don't really know what you want to do. So let's say you did electrical.
Yeah.
And you get to the end and then you just kind of, well, I'm an electrical engineer now. I guess I'll just take whoever offers me first. Then you enter maybe an industry you don't want to be in or something.
Right.
So
yeah, that's a good point too.
You know, then your hand is kind of forced.
Yeah.
I knew that I was going to go into power quite early on. So I always knew that I'd be there somewhere. I didn't know exactly what companies I'd be at, but at least I knew the industry.
Right.
So a lot of things I say on the videos that I make is it's a lot easier to find a job if you know what you're looking for.
Sure.
And specifically how to tailor your resume,
Yep.
how to understand the vernacular, what's required of you, what courses to focus on, rather than just, okay, I'm a chemical engineer now.
And blanketing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's so broad. All of these disciplines, they're involved everywhere. I mean, like you said, in biomedical, there's electrical, there's chemical, there's,
Right.
There's
research, there's product design.
So, but you kind of knew early on, and because you tried so many different things, gave you an idea. Not only did it pad your resume here with all the different things, but okay, so take me back to kind of your first interview.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was that like? What did your resume look like then? And yeah, just do you remember anything that kind of sticks out from that moment, and why did they choose to go with you?
Besides the, like, very shaky hand
Yeah,
getting off the resume and the great part about UC being a co-op school is they're super big on career fairs, and not just career fairs for, like, the graduating seniors and getting placed full time, but also for co-op opportunities. So I went, you're 17, 18, you, like, put on your suit, you walk in. It's probably the first time you put on a suit for a lot of people. You have your little portfolio with your resumes, and you go and you start handing them off. You do a crazy amount of research, more research than I do now, probably back then on companies, just to try to, like,
but you
have
did
something.
that.
Yeah.
I don't think most people do that.
Interesting.
That is one thing I try to say. I made a video about how to excel at a career fair.
Yeah.
And some of the tips I gave were like, make sure you do some research, have a spreadsheet, and know who you want to target.
Yeah.
And if there's somebody who's really big, maybe don't go to them right away when there's 50 people. Like, wait for there are a lot of little tips there. But I don't think people do the research. So do your research.
Do your research.
Yes.
But I think, like, know what things you're going to bring up with that research.
Yes.
So I kind of, like, word vomited. I remember going to the very first company that I was like, I'm kind of interested, but I'm going to use them as a warm up.
Yeah.
And I, like, handed this lady my resume, and I'm like, I see that your company's really into sustainability. Like, how do you do that? And she's like, in HR. Like, she doesn't know. And she's like, what are you talking about, kid? And needless to say, I did not get any contact from them after the fact, which is fine and dandy and good. But I think, like, that first co-op especially is more about them having a business need and them seeing some kind of potential in you.
Right.
Again, like, being in a university that has a pretty solid foundation with a lot of companies, like, kind of utilizing that resource of, like, we had a database too where you could kind of throw your name in the hat a lot of different places. And yeah, I mean, I remember my first co-op boss super well. Great guy. Obviously, I'm 19. I don't know anything about engineering or anything about anything, really. I remember him telling me, like, he had shoes older than me, and I said, that's gross, but...
That is gross. That's funny, though.
But yeah, so I think it's, like, one, just showcasing, like, curiosity and open-mindedness, and, like, kind of getting a little bit lucky in they saw a lot of potential in, what your grades are and, like, what your interests were, how you can speak on experiences, how you think and problem solve. I mean, engineering, we all joke about it, but it's kind of like a glorified problem-solving degree.
No, very good.
So, like, how you can kind of talk your way through those things, and just a little bit of magic and fingers crossed.
I like it. No, it always does take a little bit of luck, that's for sure.
Yeah.
You have to be in the right place, right time. You have to also gel well enough with the person you're talking to, whether that's an HR person or the hiring manager.
Right.
It's all there. But you gotta have a lot of at-bats. You gotta try.
Yeah,
right. So I think people get really
discouraged
and put down and put themselves down. Oh, well, it didn't work out.
Yeah.
So I don't know. As a guy, I might have a different experience because when you're looking for a girlfriend, let's say, okay, you're being put down all the time. You're just kind of like, okay, I want to talk to this girl.
It's more comfortable for you to be rejected.
As a guy, you kind of get more rejected in life more often.
Yeah.
So
I would say that season of my life, like
yes.
the first co-op, is the most rejection I've ever got.
Yes, of course, because
it's because you have no experience.
You gotta learn,
and you're learning how to interview. And I remember I was
Mm-hmm.
in a position where like my grades were good enough that I was kind of blessed to like have an opportunity to either look in that fall semester, that spring. So I was kind of looking for the fall, but not like a crazy amount, not putting a lot of pressure on it. I was like fumbling interview after interview, and it just wasn't.
How many did you do? Do you remember?
Probably like I probably applied.
Right. Yeah. What's your funnel? So how many applications did you have? How many interviews?
I mean, it's a co-op, so maybe like 20, 25, and then I probably got like 5 interviews, and they were all really bad, and I kind of like mentally gave up. And I registered for class. I had a lease. I was like ready to go back to university and go to school, and it wasn't a big deal.
Right.
A little defeated, but like whatever. And a company like very close to my hometown called me and said, hey, we have a kind of a last minute opening. Do you want to come in and interview? And that's the big thing, like kind of just being open-minded and never saying no to opportunities, just hearing them out.
Absolutely.
And I went in, and that was the first time I'd ever interviewed with like 6 people.
Oh,
like
yes,
one person for 30 minutes, one person for
you went through the gauntlet.
Yeah, and you're kind of out and you're like exhausted. And then I did a plant tour, and I walked back in, and on the seat I was sitting, they had an offer letter.
Oh, that's
perfect. It was beautiful. And I like, it was to start the next week, so that's probably why they had an offer letter. But I was of course like, yeah, they really want me.
I knocked out of the park.
So maybe a little bit of both, but like the relief in that and the just naiveness of being like, yeah, I'll take it, and like immediately signing, because you're like, whatever, I need something.
But what did that do to your confidence level?
Oh my gosh, shot it through the roof. And then once you get one industry experience under your belt, like those conversations after that are night and day.
Right?
Like,
well, that's the challenge. I think a big challenge is not only, career advancement and pathway and all that, but how do you get your foot in the door somewhere? Right? What do you do, especially with the companies you want to work for and the industries you want to be in? And honestly, it unfortunately, it's whenever you're meeting somebody for an interview or a phone call, you have a split second. And there's just a moment there where the interviewer or somebody decides, yeah, okay, actually, I like this person. Let's go with it. Like, even doesn't matter how logical they are, it's still a human kind of feeling.
Yeah, it is, and it's impression based. As somebody who does interviews now, I'm like,
yes, now you know.
You kind of know within maybe 5 minutes, or less, like if it's gonna work out or not. Yeah, that's a real thing. Yeah,
for sure. Good to know. Okay, so you get your foot in the door, and now you're going through it. And can you just walk me through the last 4 years? We don't need to go too deep into all of them, but. One thing I do want to touch on is your career advancement has been astronomical, and that's actually probably, we're gonna take a picture of me here being shocked at you telling me this story. That's gonna be the thumbnail. Yeah. But just, you don't have to tell us all the numbers, but
sure.
How okay, roughly what did you start at? Okay, roughly, and then kind of how did that progress through?
Yeah, so coming out of undergrad, I took my first time engineering offer at $65K, which is very normal Midwest salary to start out, and I was pretty jazzed about it. I knew that I wanted to kind of widen my net outside of the biomed industry, like we talked about. It's just niche, and the end game or idea was always to take things from other industries and at some point kind of collect them all in my tool bag and go back to biomedical.
Oh, I see. Why did you want to get into a leadership role?
I think, as you progress in an engineering career, you typically you kind of come to a fork in the road and you decide so I want to go down the path of people management or go kind of down the technical track.
Yep.
I always had a really strong inkling that I was going to be a technical track kind of girl. I was super introverted growing up and in undergrad. And it's kind of funny because I feel like when you met me, you were probably like, that doesn't make any sense. But I was kind of coming out of it right around that time. And I just thought it would be a nice kind of setup for myself if I ended up kind of deciding to go down that management track. So Yeah, it was kind of like, one, not knowing geographically where I wanted to end up, and then two, getting some formal like people management, change management experience under my belt, because you don't get that in an engineering undergrad setting necessarily.
Were you more just curious to have the experience, or you wanted to put that on your resume, or did you think that, wait a minute, I want to be a leader?
I would say more of the first two, definitely. Like, I want to be a leader was really never on my thought process. I thought maybe that could happen, but like I highly doubt it. That's not really me.
Okay.
So let's just kind of see what happens. And if anything else, it's really good experience to kind of like get that every 6 months for 2 years. I'm rotating to a different part of the country, whether it's the Nebraska, California, Texas, Kentucky kind of meeting new people, figuring out different areas if I like them or not, cultural stuff, all that good stuff. Yeah, long story short, I figured out that I'm like just as good at the management stuff as the technical stuff, or so I was being told.
Right. Well, no, I think your resume speaks for that for sure.
I kind of, like a year and a half in, I had some of my mentors kind of nudging me of like, hey, you seem like you really like being out on the shop floor. You seem like you have kind of a natural knack for leading these groups on these projects. What do you think about doing a full rotation as kind of a frontline leader and an ops supervisor? And I said, why not? Like being open and trying new things.
So I think the challenge that many people have is, how do you get into a leadership type opportunity?
Yeah.
Were you specifically looking for a company that does these rotations? I know those are typically larger companies, like Fortune 500s. But how did you get that first taste of leadership?
Sure.
Like, did you just kind of tell your manager, hey, I want to be a leader, and then he said, no, you're not ready, or he says, yes, you are the one we picked.
That's a good.
How did that come about to get this role? Because typically, the amount of leadership type roles there aren't that many versus the amount of potential demand for it. Not everybody wants to be a leader, but.
Yeah.
So how did you get that first one? What did you do?
I resisted it like the plague, so maybe do that. No, I'm just kidding. I think being interested in a rotational program was a big help.
Rotational program.
But it existed organically in me way before that. And when I kind of reflect and think back to my co-ops, I was the co-op who was teaching all the other co-ops how to do a lot of the things.
Okay.
In school, I was the one who was kind of the project manager on all our projects. And I was working with the class salutatorian on these smart people, but they needed someone to kind of dial them in a little bit, and I just naturally always kind of fit that. So I think it can be a few different things. Again, I wasn't looking for it, so maybe if you stop looking, it'll just show up on your lap. I don't think that's true, but
no, that's not true.
But I think the rotational programs now, even the smaller companies are starting to do them, and they're great to kind of get that pocketed experience in different settings.
But did you just go on Zillow? Did you go on Indeed? Zillow. Did you just go? Sorry, I'm looking at houses. Did you go on Indeed and just type in rotational program for biomedical engineers? How do you find these programs?
I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. I knew the company very well that I ended up with post-grad. And I knew that they had kind of a killer one. I only knew that because I had friends who were older that I met on co-op who had told me about this and said, if that's what you want to do, this is the company to apply for.
Gotcha.
So they were at my 5th year career fair. I looked them up to see if they were at a booth. I saw it. I went to them.
You shot your shot.
I shot my shot. They had probably 5 or 6 different types of rotational programs. So we talked. One, just I introduced myself, talked about my background, talked about why I was interested in, and then talked about the different types that they offered and to see which one made the most sense and fit. And funny enough, I interviewed for 3 of the 5 because I had no idea. So keeping your net wide and keeping your options open has always served me well. The only problem with that is it makes decision making a little bit harder.
Okay, but you got a ton of, all right. That's a great problem to have.
Yeah, right? Yeah, it's true.
So one of the things that always struck me about you is that your group of friends and the amount of people that you know is tremendous.
Yeah.
Okay, how did you kind of cultivate this? Is it a personality thing? Or you're just a magnetic beacon for people?
Yeah, right. Yeah. I don't think it's that. If I had to try to one, I'm like super fortunate, and that's really what it is. But if I had to try to figure it out, I would say it's like equal parts. Like I went to a very large high school and stayed really connected with people and made sure that, you know, I did. I think especially as you graduate and then move into young adulthood and move into like mid-late 20s and 30s and so on and so forth, maintaining long distance friendships is hard. And so like you put in the energy and the effort to the ones that matter, and you like pay attention to that a little bit of who's putting the energy and effort into you.
Yes.
So I've just been really fortunate in like who has done that with me, who's kind of reciprocated what I'm putting in. I went to a really large high school. I was one of those kids who was kind of involved in everything. I was like equal parts nerd and jock, so that definitely kind of like
that's awesome. That's a good combination.
I played sports, varsity sports, like varsity starter, and then I was also like captain of Model UN, like very different things, and then marching band and all that good stuff. And then in college, being a woman in engineering is like kind of a minority, although it's growing. So it's
growing for sure.
But I ended up joining an engineering sorority, and that like really opened the doors to a lot of connections.
Let's talk about this a little bit. Being a woman in engineering, do you feel that, okay, the numbers are growing, like you said. I think a lot of young women are being shown this way of doing it.
Yeah.
And do you feel that there are advantages to it? And if so, and then what are the disadvantages?
Yeah, like speaking very candidly, a lot of companies have big pushes for DE&I, so diversity, inclusion, all that kind of good stuff. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's like, and different people tell you different things. I have friends who are very much on the different side, and I think I know. You know who they are.
I know who they are. That's all good.
But, I love them for their own opinions, right? But I'm like a big fan of it because to me, it's always kind of leveled the playing field of like, we recognize that we have a lot of kind of the same type of person on paper at this company. So we understand that we can bring in unique perspectives and ideas if we actively try to recruit for a woman or someone of color or this or that. So I think that's been a huge thing. As far as an advantage, like, I don't know that it's necessarily, and maybe it's a little bit ignorant to say this, but I don't know that it's necessarily like helped me in any way. I try to like not notice it.
Right.
Which you do. Like, it's just a thing and it's part of it. I mean, I notice it in my everyday when me and a colleague are working on something and we like walk in to give an update, and I know more than my male colleague, but the guys in the room are looking at him and not me.
Not you, yeah. Gotcha.
Like, it happens all the time, and it's just part of it, and it's like an unfortunate reality, and I think, again, we're like getting better and better at it, and like when you kind of learn to hold your own. But I've never felt like, oh, you know, she got the job because she's a girl, or like, oh, she got recruited because she's a girl. There are plenty of other girls who are smart or smarter than me who could have got it. I think I got it for myself and like who I am as a person. So
no, like I said, I think your track record proves that, and it's very impressive.
Yeah.
All the women engineers that I've met have been really strong in their knowledge and how they communicate, all of those things. And I think in many ways they have to be. Right. Because it's a male-dominated industry.
There's some more to prove, than others. Right? Yeah.
Right. So I'm familiar with the power space, and there are very few women there at all. And all the ones, you can hear it in all the project calls. If it's a woman PM or something, you know, they're very assertive. They know what they're doing. Yeah. Right. So they've sort of, you know, they've maybe had to learn even harder than just a regular guy.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
I think we, like, as women in this space, we have no other option.
Yes.
Like, we have to be good, and we have to be kind of at the top. Otherwise, we're going to get bulldozered over, because I can name probably like 5 positions off the top of my head where I was the only one out of all my counterparts who was a female, and like probably the youngest by a decade.
Sure.
So you have to get good at it to hold your own, and the reason being of why you have to do that kind of is just like, whatever, I just have to be good.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So Mia, in the 4 years you've been working, when did you start working?
Like 4.5 now. I'm getting old.
Okay, so old. So you were able to significantly multiply your starting salary. I want to get to this. This is a big talking point. So can you tell me roughly how many times were you able to multiply by what amount?
Yeah, I would say up to today I'm at like 3x,
3x.
my entry salary.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, that is incredible. Okay, so I guess how did you get there? Not only, in the roles that you were taking, but what sort of path did you pick? Were you actively looking for, okay, I want to just find the job that is going to pay me the most. I'm going to find that job. Okay?
Yeah.
Was that your goal?
No, that's a good question. Like, transparently, my end game goal, which is very silly, like looking back at it now, but I always just wanted to make 100K, and that was like my
okay.
And
that's a great goal.
I have very much like surpassed that at this point, and I'm like not even 30 yet, so I'm kind of like, okay, maybe time to reset the goal.
Very good.
So to answer your question, like that was never
was not the goal.
The intent, just like everything else, a little bit of right place, right time.
Yes.
Silly things, but like I keep my LinkedIn super updated.
Okay.
I treat my resume like a working doc, and I treat the LinkedIn the same way, because recruiters are out there.
They're out there.
They're all over the place, and that was like my biggest jump. I had some jumps along the way, but my biggest jump in salary in the last 4 years has come from being recruited by another company.
Okay. So when that recruiter called you, okay, did you have any idea what those numbers might look like and all that? And if you did, were you going to say yes no matter what? Or
well, I wasn't actively looking,
okay.
But I had been working for 2.5, 3 years, so I loved my job, and I loved where I was at geographically and what I was doing.
Yes.
And I had been reached out to by a recruiter, and I sort of had this thought of like, like I haven't interviewed in a minute. I bounced it off my mentor, who was also like a level above me at the place I was at the time. Yeah. And he had said, like, you should take it. It's good practice, That was where we were viewing it. And I said, I'll never take that unless it's, like, stupid money, right? Yeah. So I do the interview. Again, very different, like, approach to me interviewing now than how I used to interview. Like, I used to take feverish notes on the call. Like, don't get me wrong, I looked at it a little bit, but I knew this company pretty well, too, so that helped.
Yes.
So I go into the interview. It goes great. I get paired with some really good people to interview me, really nice conversations. And I had a good feeling about the company. I was also kind of looking to get back up to that area of the U.S. at the time, too. So
okay, so location was a part of it.
It kind of aligned. But again, I wasn't looking. I wasn't, like, open to work on my LinkedIn or whatever that status is. I hadn't talked to my employer at the time about leaving, anything like that. Whatever. So I do the interview. I think the next day... or I do it on a Friday. I think the Monday I get an offer. She calls me and she's like telling me about all this. My jaw is just like slowly like open. I'm like, that's a lot of money. So then I go into work and we start every morning at that job with a morning meeting where you're like a supervisor and you're on the mic and you're talking about your numbers from the previous day. And my mentor and I were really close, and he pulls me aside right after and he's like, why are you acting so squirrely? What's going on? Yep. And I didn't say anything. I kind of just looked down. He's like,
yep.
You got that offer.
There's someone else.
And I said, I just nodded. And he said, it was stupid money, wasn't it? And I said, So he's like, let's grab a beer tonight. So I like meet him after work. We grab a beer and I kind of give him the details of like the comp package. And he looks at me and he said, he's like a very Southern, like, big guy, ex-Marine. He looks at me and said, baby girl, you gotta go.
You gotta go. Yeah.
And that was pretty much it. Like, a little bit of other stuff in there, but I turned in a notice and moved back up to closest to where I was from. And I've been there a few years now.
Okay. Very, very good. Now that's a little bit of luck. Like
right place, right time.
But at the same time, though, you're always, you have a good LinkedIn, like you said. You have a good network of people.
Yep.
Okay, so then what would it have taken for you to stay at that job?
I guess
if it was not location dependent, because
I was
the big
gonna
thing
say,
you also wanted to move, and that was a big
geography
part of it too.
kind of led to it. Yeah.
But if geography was the same, and what would it have taken? Would they have had to have a massive counter offer, or was there anything they could have done at this point? Or you're just kind of...
I, at the time, was a frontline leader at that place, and I was very much, they knew it and I knew it, ready to be like a middle manager.
Yes.
And the place I was going was kind of promising that. So that was one thing that like wasn't happening anytime soon.
Okay.
Another thing, maybe a little silly, but to me it's not, is higher education is super important. Again, being one of 6 kids to only ever get an undergrad degree, I've always been very passionate about school and educating yourself and just curious. I wanted to go to grad school, and like this company that I was talking about that recruited me was offering to pay fully. For my grad school. And that was huge, and that was something that the company I was at currently wasn't going to be able to touch or do.
Okay. And
there were no stipulations on it. Like I got to choose kind of my dream school for that grad degree. So
awesome.
Yeah, it was kind of
okay. So
time to go.
Time to go. Yeah. Sometimes so in what industries were these in?
Yeah. So the rotational program was in a very mechanical heavy industry. It was industrial filtration. Okay. It kind of touches a lot of divisions of that. It was industrial gas, water purification, HVAC, all that kind of stuff, which like I didn't know anything about.
No, but because you had some prior experience.
Filtration, yeah, exactly. I remember being in that interview though, and the guy was like, biomed, filtration. What do you know about filtration? And I spent 10 minutes talking about like the kidney ureter system as the body's filtration system. I was grasping a little bit, but that's what I knew. Yeah. And then the company I was just talking about for the recruitment was logistics and distributions. Okay. Which again, like neither one of those were places that I necessarily saw myself.
Yeah, not biomed either.
No.
But because you had some experience doing manufacturing before. Yep. That was it. So manufacturing, when you say manufacturing as a whole is kind of an industry. Yep. So if you have, does it translate experience from one to another?
Yeah. I would say it depends, which is a good safe answer, right? Okay. But in general, I would say yeah. Like I'm always kind of actively looking and applying and seeing different things. I think that's a good habit for everyone to get into. One, to just get the practice, but 2, to kind of see like, what am I worth in the market right now and today? Okay. And I would say most of the time, like I personally don't have a lot of hard struggles when I apply to something that's a little bit out of biomed or filtration or logistics and distributions. And it all goes back to like, what is an engineer, right? We're glorified problem solvers a little bit. Yeah. So if you have that and you start to kind of gather this experience in other kind of jobs and things that you've done, then you kind of just are telling your story and showing it. It's all about how you spin the story too.
Yes, well, I think it's very obvious that me talking to you, you're an excellent communicator.
Yeah, fair. Yeah,
so
thank you.
Those are very important skills, especially when it comes to leadership and all that, just the way you carry yourself, the way that you can tell a story, the way that you project your voice, all of these factors do matter. Right. And would you say that those skills are learned or just something that you're born with? And if they're learned, what did you do to kind of get to this part of your career?
Yeah. I love that question. I ask myself that question all the time. There's some aspects of being like a communicator and a leader that I feel like are a little bit innate or like you're born with them. And I only say that in the sense of like as somebody who interviews people actively now, and being in the interviewer chair, sometimes I talk to people and I can sort of tell, like we talked about that 5 minutes, you can kind of tell if they got it or they don't got it. Yep. I'd much rather hire somebody who maybe doesn't have all the technical ability or specific skill set that I want and like teach them those things than vice versa, because teaching them the communication, the leadership stuff, it's definitely usually, but it's sometimes possible, but it's way easier to teach them like a specific technical skill in my mind. But I will say like I'm always refining those things. So I'm like pretty well read in that kind of area of life. I read a lot of leadership development books, which I'm also
do you have a few that you
yeah.
Give me a few.
Leadership Gold, that's a John Maxwell one. Extreme Ownership. Yep. I can't remember the Leif Erikson.
That's the Explorer.
Yeah, go on. It's some of the Marine, like former Marine guys. So, books like that, as well as like some financial books too, because I feel like all that stuff is very like hand in hand and tied. Like Rich AF is a really good one. Psychology of Money is one you gave me.
Yeah,
it's a really good one. I'm not saying like you're gonna be able to like read a book and learn everything you need to know and copy and paste it. That never works. But like kind of gaining the perspective from those books at least, and being able to like adapt those concepts and then apply them in your real life is helpful. But so I think it's like, to answer your question, it's a mix of both of natural kind of ability and skills, but also being a sponge and being receptive to things. And that's being in a rotational leadership program. You also learn a ton about like leadership styles and skills that don't work.
Yes,
so I kind of took a lot of mental note of that.
Does yelling work?
You're right. Yeah, exactly.
No, awesome. That's good to know. I think that by being well-read and expanding your knowledge base, rather than just, as an engineer, you typically are a very logical person, right? Yeah. Most people are, left-brained, I think.
Yeah.
So then, you think a certain way. The communication art is very much lost on us, and that is something that I also struggle with, finding people. Because if I'm interviewing somebody who's an engineer, I know that they can learn,
right?
But can they communicate?
Can they relay it?
Can they relay it? That's a big part too. And you might be a genius, but if you can't explain what you did and why, and be able to tell other people, then it's kind of lost.
Yeah.
In a way.
No, I agree.
And even just mentorship, somebody who's a technical expert, I would expect them to mentor the younger folks, and if they can't do that, then they're just holding on to themselves.
I think for me, it started in school. Like I remember being in these engineering courses and them being really terribly, terribly difficult, and you're like doing Laplace transforms on this huge whiteboard.
Yes, we've all been there.
But I remember kind of like at some point I put the time and the hours like we were talking about before, where I get it and it clicks. The best thing for me before an exam was then teach it to my friends.
Yes.
And I think that in a weird way, looking back, gave me a lot of that preliminary like communication piece, because that stuff is not easy to talk about.
No.
And I taught a lot of our friends about that stuff. So.
No, good for you. Good for you. Isn't it so funny? Those little kind of habits that you're doing for so long, and then now they build up. Everything's exponential.
Yeah. And you don't even know in the moment.
You don't realize. But I love the tips about the books, though. I'm all about that. That's personal development, really.
Yeah, it is.
If
it's
you
good.
think about it, personal development, and not just technical development as far as what you have to do in your profession and career. That's important too.
Right.
But especially for a leadership role, you have to be well read and understand how to communicate and all these things that we talked about.
Exactly. Especially when you kind of feel like you're maybe have a leg down on it a little bit, or you're like, I wasn't really trained for leadership. I'm just a little engineer.
No, I'm just an engineer. Yeah. No, that's the truth. And something you mentioned earlier, it's that when the opportunity arises, you have to be kind of ready to take it. You have to be there.
Yep.
And I think the misconception that a lot of people have is that, well, I'm 5 or 10 years in. I need to be making this much money. I need to be here in my career. And it's like, yeah, you know what? That all sounds good on paper, but that's not really the reality of it. Okay. Right. Nobody's going to pay you just because you've got just 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
What can you offer at this stage?
Yep.
And at that point, that means you've increased your engineering skills, your communication skills. That's what. Because you're right, though. Eventually, there's always a fork in the road between the technical route and the leadership route. But, some of those qualities overlap.
Yeah.
You have to know how to do both of those items.
I feel like if you do it right, you can kind of hop between the forks.
Yeah, you might be able to.
I had a mentor one time tell me on the opportunity thing of, like, jump, like, the net will appear. Which is really cool, and like it's easier when you're in your early 20s. It's becoming increasingly harder to have that mindset as I get a little bit older, and have more responsibilities. But that's something that, like, whenever I have a big decision to make about those kinds of things, that I hear in the back of my head, and it's I don't want to give people false hope or confidence, but it's proven to be really helpful for me. So
some faith, in something.
Yeah.
No, that's amazing. Okay, so in the last job, you're getting paid all this good money, but when somebody's paying you a lot of money, they expect a lot out of you.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about that experience and leading to some other negative aspects of the professional life?
That's a really nice way to put it.
Yes, I want you to tell a story.
if I had to dial it in and kind of get to the punchline of it, it's everything comes at a cost, right? It's really great to have these huge, big, flashy salaries. But typically that means like you're sacrificing something else, whether it's hours or passion or fit or any of those things. And I'll never speak ill of like an experience or employer, because I think all those things are good and they kind of culminate into who you are.
That's very good.
But I like, if I had to get down to it, I would say this particular one, just those are some things that I didn't really realize I wanted to fold on or not fold on until you're kind of in the thick of it. Getting all these promotions and making the big money and being like mostly a full-time grad student, it's a lot. And having some family stuff going on too.
Yep, life happens.
And for me, I feel like I romanticize it a little bit and kind of reset every time. I'm a big traveler, and I get that from you a little bit.
Yes.
But I'm trying to go, to every continent before I turn 30, and I was just on a really cool trip.
Antarctica, I've got a trip.
Yeah, we're doing that one.
Yeah.
But I was just in, like 3 weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago, I was just in New Zealand and Australia, and it was awesome. And I was doing some like healthy reflecting one day of kind of like, do I feel like, back to the calling thing, just the passion piece. So I feel like I'm really passionate about this work, and that like, I'm investing a lot of time. That's my personality, so that's kind of going to happen wherever. But do I feel like it's a healthy amount for me?
Right. It's
different for every single person. And I spent a little time, and I came to the conclusion of like, no, when I was on that trip and doing a reset. So I started kind of throwing my name in the hat for some different opportunities, and it's been going really well. When I came back from the trip, I kind of let that employer know that it wasn't, like I said, nothing bad or nothing really to dig, but time to move on to the next thing. So now I'm on a little bit of a break for the first time in like several years, which is great. I get to come and visit and hang out.
Also.
But yeah, trying to do a reset and decide, like, I'm at a point now, which I feel like I'm fortunate, because a lot of people get to this point maybe a little later in their life, where I'm learning that it's a little bit less about them. I mean, money is important, like we all work to make money, but it's a little bit less about the money, as long as it's a certain threshold, and more about how interested I am in it and how much of a fit I am for the position. So I'm in the job market now. I'm in the job search, which is fun.
But did you have any fear as far as, if I leave these guys, I will never make this much money again, or I will never find another job like that again? I mean, did you have any of those thoughts come up? Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I absolutely did. But I think, and this is probably a whole nother segment on your talk someday, but
Part two.
I'm a budget queen.
Yes.
I love a budget. Again, it's like the way I grew up a little bit in the blue collar and the financial kind of paycheck to paycheck mentality. But like I said, making over 100 was never even on my like game plan or radar. So I've been really fortunate the last few years now of like making the money I'm making and doing some smart things with the money. So I mean, I was like, oh, this is a bummer. I'm probably not going to make this, or at least not make it anytime soon again. But I'm not as happy as I know I could be. And that's more important to me. And I think that's a little bit of that's a mature decision. But like,
that is very mature.
I don't know. I think like I said, it's knowing what you need and knowing, do you like what you're doing? And like, do you wake up every day like motivated to go in, and do you go to bed at the end of every night knowing that like you're doing the right thing? And that was it. So
would you say that you experienced some level of burnout then in that position?
Yeah. Quite a bit. And again, it's not like a bashing on the position. It's just those higher, like the higher up you move up the pipeline, the more the expectations are of you. And it's like deciding when enough is enough for you personally. And for me, I still don't really know the answer to that, but I'm learning of where that line is. But I think as time goes on, you decide where your line is, and you say, you know what, I'm kind of willing to take a little bit of a pay cut to get back into something that I know that I like, also because I know that I can afford it. It's really easy for me to see that as like a single 20 something with no kids and like
Yep.
no husband and anything to really worry about. We might not be having the same conversation if I had those things.
So I got a little story. We went on a cruise together, my wife and I and some of our friends a couple of months ago. Mia was excited. She was, company, everything is going well. They're paying me and all this good stuff. She was like, I maybe want to buy a house. So I kind of said, hey, listen.
That was only 4 months ago.
Yeah, it's true. I feel like I'm saying tell my story like it's eons ago. And she goes, the bank approved me for such and such amount house. And I'm like, oh my gosh, hold on, stop for a second, okay? Look, if you buy this house, okay, then you are paying that for the next however many months.
Right.
That's stress as well.
Right, yeah.
Right, so you were smart to, certainly go buy something, but do not overextend.
Pump the brakes, yeah.
You can add stress into your life by purchasing things that you probably don't need that take time away, take money away and all that. I've made those mistakes many times. So I try to just tell Mia here that, hey, be careful what you sign up for because that's a crazy level of stress. If you would have bought something like that, you're not leaving your job.
It'd be a little tough.
It'd be tougher. No, you could leave, but it's, I gotta sell,
Yeah, it'd be a little tough. No, I think, like, when I first signed that offer, you and I sent it to you because I've always kind of trusted your opinion on those things. Yeah. And we talked about lifestyle creep as a bit of a thing. And again, kind of related to budgeting stuff, but, like, I... as somebody who's always been pretty tight with my money, I'm still that way. But there have been moments in the last year.
What's something you splurged on the past 4 years?
This one.
I know one. Give me something big.
On my Australia trip, I just I called Nenad and I said, hey, this is a 14-hour flight and I've never upgraded my flight. I think that this is the time to do it. Yes. It's only like an extra $2-3 grand. And I get a full bed and I get to sleep. And you're like, don't do that. That's so silly. And I get it.
I gave you the spiel about investing in SPY. In 10 years, you can have a return.
You could do this. For the record, I ended up doing it and it was fantastic.
Okay,
so,
all right.
But I will say it's going to be really tough now to like fly in economy. So
of course. You tasted the forbidden fruit.
I think it's a balance like anything else. Like I don't do crazy stuff like that very often.
Yeah.
But
no, listen, I had to be the voice of reason here to kind of let you know. Because, like, Mia, does your back hurt? Are you elderly? You don't need a first-class ticket.
You're in your 20s, right?
But, no, listen, it's an awesome experience.
Yeah, it is.
As is any of the travel, any of the things, too. So, typically, it's better to spend your money on experiences rather than, physical items.
Right,
so,
right.
There you go. Now you got an awesome thing.
I did it.
Good for you.
It was great, yeah.
Good for you. Oh, my gosh, Mia, I feel like we can talk all night.
I know,
I'm trying to think... I want to come back full circle just to your time in college. And that was, of course, the catalyst to getting you in your career. And, that's what you were looking for. You're looking for something that you can keep progressing in and not just a job, right? You're looking for something serious. In college, were there ever moments where you doubted yourself and you thought about quitting? And if so, why did you stick through it? And then what message do you have for people that are currently in school that are trying to decide what to do because now engineering's gotten hard, let's say in year 3 or year 4.
Yeah. I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but
go on, hold on.
It's very related to your question. Yeah, it gets hard. That's the like punchline of it.
Right.
There was a moment and a time where I wasn't sure if I could do it. And part of it was the like classes were hard. I didn't do super well on an exam. I wasn't sure how that course was going to shake out. It was one of those ridiculous classes, by the way, where the pass fail is like 40 or 50% of like you look to the left and the right, and those two people probably aren't going to be with you. Yep. And I was nervous. I went to my academic advisor. Mm-hmm. I asked for the form to drop out of the engineering college. I was not sure what I was going to do next.
Wow.
She gave it to me. I read it. I understood like what it meant. Like I started signing it. I signed the M in my name, and I was like, maybe I should like talk to my friends about this and just see what they think. Like I was kind of keeping it all to myself at that point. So I was like,
oh, man.
I'll bring it back to you tomorrow. Let me just like take a little time. She's like, at this point, a little bit like whatever. Like you're probably leaving me. I'm not gonna be your advisor any longer. Sure, fine. I kind of grounded, I had some conversations with some friends, and I kind of grounded myself in the, like, back to the whole, my family doesn't really go to college. This is kind of a really cool opportunity. I know I have it in me. I know I'm a hard worker. Like, this is very hard. And again, I don't think I'm the smartest person, but I know that I can like dial it in and grind it out and get it done. And I did not do well in the class, but I like decided not to drop out of engineering. I tore it up. I emailed her and said I was really delusional that day, and not to worry about it. And I'm sure she's very used to like kids doing that kind of stuff,
Sure.
dramatic, right? But I passed the class, which was all I needed. I like whatever it was, a C- or something. The worst grade I ever got in undergrad, by the way. And then I went home for the summer, did all that stuff. That was my last summer off. I came back and like I had a 4.0 the rest of undergrad.
Wow.
So I think it's the like, you know, as a person what you're capable of. There's no shame if it's not the right thing. That's also why co-op is and internships are so important. I had already kind of started doing that and knew that I liked it, knew that it was a good fit. So it was kind of talking myself off the edge and like getting back down from it and knowing that I was doing the right thing for me. But yeah, there's no shame if it's not the right thing either. But it was the right thing for me, and it almost wasn't me.
Okay, so the message is tear up the paper and just keep
just
on
keep
going.
grinding. Right?
Is it worth it?
Yeah, I would say it's worth it. I mean, I can't imagine my life any differently, but I think that's how life goes. Like, it's decisions, and you make the most of whatever you reap whatever your decision was, and you make the most of it. And it's back to like, you know, if I would have gone to UC versus Pitt was my other number one. Like, we might not even be sitting here because I might not know you, but like I'm sure
friends and everything too.
I'm sure I would have turned out just fine, right?
For sure. That's
so
funny how that works.
Yeah. You kind of put your nose down and go into it. So yeah.
Oh wow. Okay, Mia, thank you so much for agreeing to
fun.
do this.
Of course, yeah.
We'll have to do a round 2 when I see you next time.
I love it.
There's so much to unpack. But no, it's a journey.
Yep.
It takes time, takes effort, but that's why it's worth it at the end. It's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be hard, because if it was easy, then everyone would do it, and then, you know.
Right.
So. Right. But you have to go through the gauntlet to get to where you need to be.
Cool. Absolutely. Cool.
Thank you so much.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
You got it.
Hey guys, if you liked that interview, please give me a like and a subscribe, and we'll be sure to do some more with Mia.
Very good.
Thank you.